welcome in third session of the second session of ICSCTI 2021. I'm self Mr. Anil Kumar Pandey, PhD research scholar from JPU, Jayaprakash University, Chhapra, Bihar, from India. Uh, so, in my research paper, I discussing about presentation related to mixed ligand metal complexes with 2,2 bipyridine. So my title is Studies on some mixed ligand metal complexes with 2,2 bipyridine. In this topic, we discuss mainly abstract introduction, synthesis of cheap bases, synthesis of mixed ligand, result and discussion, and then now conclusion. So that first, I would like to discuss about abstract about my topic. In this topic, we discuss that first 50 years of the chemistry of 2,2-bipyridine are reviewed from its first discovery in 1888 to the outbreak of the second global conflict in 1939. So that first time, Tej Blau described the dry distillation of copper iron pyridine to carboxylate in 1888 and reported this with melting point 70 degrees Celsius. That first reported absorption spectrum of 2,2-bipyridine from 1913 recorded in ethanolic solution as a solvent. A novel series of mixed ligand complexes of copper, cobalt iron, nickel iron, copper iron with the chief bases derived from 5-chlorosalicylaldehyde sulfonamide and 2,2-bipyridine have been synthesized. The obtained metal complexes are characterized by elemental analysis, molar conductivity, magnetic susceptibility, PIR, and electronic absorption spectra. The spectroscope data with the typical signal are in agreement with the suggested molecular formula of the complexes. The lower molar conductance value of this compound indicate their nature is non-electrolyte. Magnetic and electronic spectral data suggest the complexes to have octahedral stereochemistry. The spectral data indicate that the chief base ligand behave as monobasic, bidentate, and coordinated with metal ion by azomethane nitrogen. 2-pyridine nitrogen atom and phenolic oxygen atom. On the basis of mental analysis, magnetic susceptibility and electronic spectra data, geometry of complexes were proposed to be octahedral. That is confirmed. So, in the introduction of this complexes, mainly we discuss about chief bases. Chief bases are most important organic compound which containing azomethane functional group, which were first reported by Hugo Chief in 1864. Chief bases are condensation product of active carbonyl compound with primary amine. These compounds containing a general formula RCH double bond and R. In this formula, R and R dash may be alkyl, aryl, cycloalkyl, or heterocyclic group, which are also known as anyls, imines, or azomethanes. The carbonyl group of the aldehyde gives aldeamines, while that of ketone group gives ketoimines, and this provide binding site for the metal ions through non-bonding electron of the nitrogen. They also have many other hetero elements in oxygen and sulfur which provide binding site to non-bonding electrons. They are crystalline solid which are fairly basic but at least some from insoluble salt with a strong acid. They also offer a versatile and flexible series of ligands capable of binding with various metal ions to give us complexes with suitable properties for theoretical or practical application. Chief bases are used in optical and electrochemical sensors as well as in various chromatographic methods to enable detection of enhanced selectivity and sensitivity. Chief bases are widely applicable in analytical determination using reaction of condensation of primary amine and carbonyl compound, in which the azomethane bond is formed. Cheap metal complexes have been studied because they have industrial, antifungal, antibacterial, and anti-cancer applications. Anti-cancer applications. In the present work, we report the synthesis and characterization of transition metal complexes of cobalt second, nickel second, and copper second containing bidentate chip base derived from the condensation of sulfamiragine and 5-chlorosalicylaldehyde as primary ligand and 2,2-bipyridine as secondary ligands. In this way, that first I would like to discuss about the synthesis of cheap bases which acts and behave as first ligand. In this synthesis, we taken first 1.057 gram, that means 4 millimole of sulfamiragine, and in 25 ethanolic solution was added to 0.626 gram of hot ethanolic solution of 5-chloro-2-hydroxybenzaldehyde. The resulting solution was refluxed for 3 to 4 hours and then left overnight in refrigerator. After 3 to 4 hours and overnight, the solid orange color product obtained was filtered, washed with ethanol and acetone, and dried over calcium chloride in a desiccator. In that, like all to show in my screen, in product obtained chlorosalicylene sulfamiragine, that is the product. In this reaction, water will be eliminated and reaction carried out in ethanolic solution. So then now we discuss about synthesis of second ligand of mixed ligand which behave metal complexes. A solution of the cheap base ligand which taken 2 mole, that means 0.805 gram, dissolved in absolute DMF. Absolute DMF, that is solvent used in electrospinning, such as a dimethyl formamide, as a primary ligand was mixed with 2,2-bipyridine, like 0.321 gram. This is dissolved in absolute ethanol as a secondary ligand, and then a hot ethanolic solution of metal acetate salt that are cobalt acetate 0.497 gram, nickel complex compound and copper complex compound was added dropwise to the mixed ligand. The reaction mixture was refluxed for 3 to 4 hours with styrene. The colored metal complexes were filtered, washed with ethanol, and dried under vacuum over anhydrous calcium chloride, and we find a complex compound. On the basis of their IR spectral data, study about their mixed ligand, and we observe IR spectral data for different compounds like cheap bases and the mixed ligand compound of cobalt, nickel, and copper with bipyridine. On the basis of data, we consider and result will be found that in elemental analysis for the cheap base and its mixed ligand complex is in good agreement with the calculated value. Those are given in table 1. All the metal complexes are colored, solid, stable at room temperature and non-hygroscopic in nature. The observed molar conductor of the complexes in DMSO. DMSO, that means dimethyl sulfoxide. It is polar organic liquid used as a chemical solvent at room temperature. Is consistent with the non-electrolytic nature of the complexes due to the low conductivity value. On the basis of table, its value IR infrared spectra, the IR spectral band of the cheap base ligand and its metal complexes are listed in table. A very strong band at 1605 per centimeter is characterized of the azomethane nitrogen present in the chip base ligand. This was chip base to 1580 to 1570 per centimeter in the complexes, which indicate the bonding of the metal to the azomethane nitrogen. The frequency of OH group in water is absent in the spectrum of the ligand, but is present in the complexes. This shows the presence of hydration water in the complexes. That phenolic frequency OH, phenolic frequency of OH band observed at 3542 per centimeter in the chip base ligand. A band at 1510 per centimeter is assigned the frequency between carbon oxygen stretching frequency in the spectrum of free chip base, which is also shifted to lower frequency ranging from 1490 to 1500 per centimeter. In all the metal complexes, the appearance of new band between 445 to 454 per centimeter and 523 to 544 per centimeter are indicating the formation of metal nitrogen and metal oxygen bond in the complex. The two new band appear at 1605 to 1615 and 1310 to 1355 per centimeter that confirm the.
I'm Manjeet Chaudhary. I'm a PhD scholar in Himalayan University, Department of Microbiology. So, yeah. Hello.
Yes, please continue.
Yes, my study is on bacteriological contamination of water sources in my district. This is one of the district of Northeast Assam. It's situated by the bay of river Brahmaputra. So the aim of this study was to monitor the quality of the drinking water in the district and to evaluate the contamination both at the fecal and total coliform. And we had used the techniques of membrane filtration for the identification of bacteria. For the antibiotic sensitivity, we have used the KV-Beer method. Again, we try to see the rate of contamination depending upon the sources of this area used by the people. And again, we try to see the antibiotic pattern of the isolated bacteria. So, sir, the study was done from the duration of 2019 March to April 2020. And we did a collection, total sample collection is 217 numbers. So the sample collections were done as per the WHO protocol for the water sample collections. So the hello.
Yes,
hello.
please continue.
Yes, sir. So the identification of the fecal and total coliform of bacteria is done by the biochemical test and by using the selective media such as modified M-endo agar, M-tarzitol agar, and McConkey agar. And the antibiotic sensitivity, as I have mentioned, we have used the KV-Beer method for this. So we have collected the total number of 217 numbers of samples of what we had got 115 numbers of samples, so which shows the positivity rate, and we had collected some samples from river, stream, pond, dug well, tube well, and bore well water. So the isolates for this study mainly was some of the bacteria as Enterococcus and Escherichia coli, Streptococcus, Klebsiella, and Micrococcus. The highest numbers of bacteria which showing the positivity. It is Enterococcus. That is Enterococcus is isolated from most of the samples. That is 28.11%. And the least is Micrococcus. That is 0.92%. The samples sources which shows the 100% of positivity is lake water, followed by river water, that is 85.7%. Then stream water 82.14%. Then pond 77.4%. Dug well is 45.6%. And the least is bore well water, that is 6.25%. Again, while doing the antibiotic sensitivity test, we had used in total 19 numbers of antibiotics. So of that, most of the antibiotics shows sensitivity for the bacteria, but cotrimoxazole and ciprofloxacin shows the sensitivity against all the bacteria. That is against all the bacteria which I have isolated during our study. So I'm sharing the table, results table for this, of that source, according that source of water, that is dug well, pond, stream, tube well, bore well, lake and river, and their percentage of positivity according to sources and according to the number of samples we have collected, where we have found the pond has the highest rate of positivity according to the total numbers of samples collected, that is 22.12%. And the least is the bore well, that is 0.46%. While coming to the next, the number of bacteria isolated, I have what I have mentioned in the results, the tabulation I have put here. So that here the Enterococcus faecalis shows the highest rate of contamination on the percentage of total sample collected, and the Micrococcus species shows 0.92%. Again, this tabulation shows the positivity of the antibiogram of the bacteria, that is E. coli, Enterococcus, Klebsiella, Streptococcus, and Micrococcus. This one in the 11 number, what I have mentioned, it had shown the total contamination. The ZOI I have put for the short form of zone of inhibition for determining the antibiogram of the against the bacteria, and S I have mentioned for sensitivity, R for resistance, and I for intermediate. These antibiotics had given the results of against this bacteria. So, sir, coming to the conclusion, what we have done, we have, after getting the results have been shared with the public health department of this area, by letter number what I have mentioned on the 24th of April 2021, and requested the authority for taking necessary actions for improving the water quality of this area. We hope that this will help to decrease the cases of ADD in this district, which are reported in largest numbers in this area, and improve sanitation and sanitation habits and awareness will upgrade the water quality of the area, and as well as the disease ratio will be decreased in this area. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That was a very nice presentation. The presenter is now open for question answer session. The audience is welcome if there is any query or comments from the audience side to the presenter. Okay, moving on to the next presenter, Rina Michael and Dr. Emil Joseph. They're going to present their PPT on phytochemical analysis of Annona muricata using high resonance liquid chromatography and mass spectroscopy. So please assert yourself if you're present. Rina Michael.
Yeah, I am present. Yeah, I am present.
Yes, please share your screen in the presenter.
Am I
Yes, it's,
audible? I
yeah,
am
you're
audible.
audible. Yeah, it's visible. Yeah, you can start with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much. I myself, Reena Michael. I am the research scholar in the Department of Zoology, St. Albert's College, Ernakulam, India. The topic of my paper is phytochemical analysis of Annona muricata using high resonance liquid chromatography and mass spectroscopy. Coming to the introduction, natural products are sourced for many of the lead compounds used recently as medicine. The search for new therapeutic compounds always ends in plants, the vast source of potential compounds that are already being used for centuries in traditional natural medicines. These vast source of drugs or plants used from ancient times to present era is through everyday practices, documents, monuments, or part of culture. Annona muricata belonging to family Annonaceae is widely distributed in India. It is a small fruit tree reaching 5 to 8 meters in height with large glossy dark green leaves. The tree bears large yellowish to yellowish green solitary flowers on woody stalks. The edible fruit of Annona muricata are heart-shaped, green-colored with leathery skin bearing soft curved spines. The fruits have creamy white flesh with black seeds and characteristic aroma and flavor. The fruits of Annona muricata are extensively used to prepare syrups, candies, ice cream, and shakes. Roots, bark, leaves, and fruit of Annona muricata possess a wide variety of biologically active compounds and are used in traditional medicine for different diseases and ailments. Coming to the objectives, the present study was mainly focused on the phytochemical screening for various plant secondary metabolites using standardized protocols, analysis of phytochemical constituents using high resonance liquid chromatography and mass spectroscopy. Coming to the methodology, the collection of leaves. Fresh leaves of Annona muricata are collected, identified, and it was washed and air dried. Leaves were pulverized and crushed into fine powder. It is weighed and stored in airtight container. Next it is followed by the preparatory Soxhlet extraction. It was done by using Soxhlet apparatus. Ethyl acetate, methanol, and normal hexane were used as solvents. The obtained leaf extract of ethyl acetate, methanol, and hexane were evaporated using rotary evaporator. The extract was stored in desiccator until it used. It was followed by phytochemical screening. Phytochemical screening was conducted for alkaloids, carbohydrates, glycosides, saponins, phytosterols, triterpenoids, phenols, tannin, and lignans. Various tests like Mayer's test, Wagner's test, and Hager's test and Dragon-Drop test was conducted for the detection of alkaloids. A test was conducted for lignans. Mollis's test, Failing's test, and Benedict test was conducted for the detection of carbohydrates. For the detection of glycosides, Bontrager's test and Legal's test was conducted. Foam or froth test was conducted for the detection of saponins. For the detection of phytosterols and triterpenoids, Lieberman-Bouchard's test, Salkowski test was conducted. For the detection of phenolic compounds and tannins, ferric chloride test, gelatin test, lead acetate test, alkaline reagents, Shinoda test were conducted. It was followed by the phytochemical analysis in the high resonance liquid chromatography and mass spectroscopy. It was carried out at Sophisticated Analytical Instrument Facility, IIT Mumbai. Samples of the methanolic extract of Annona muricata were analyzed. The two elution solvents used were solvent A, 0.1% formic acid in 100% water, and solvent B, 100% acetonitrile at a flow rate of 0.05 milliliter per minute. Injection speed was 100 microliter per minute, flush out with injection volume of 5 microliter. Results and findings. Phytochemical analysis. Analysis of phytochemicals of Annona muricata for qualitative study showed highest activity for all the secondary metabolites under study, namely alkaloids, carbohydrates, glycosides, saponins, tannins, lignans, phytosterols, triterpenoids, and phenolic compounds to be highly available in methanolic extract, followed by ethyl acetate. Secondary metabolites were least eluted using hexane extract of Annona muricata. Hence, methanolic extract was used for HRLCMS analysis. This is a table showing the results of the qualitative phytochemical screening for different secondary metabolites using the methanolic, ethyl acetate, and hexane leaf extract of Annona muricata. HRLCMS analysis of phytocomponents. Analysis of the methanolic leaf extract of Anomoricaria using HRLCMS showed the presence of 7 major peaks and numerous minor peaks. The compounds were identified by comparing HRLCMS retention time and mass spectra with those obtained for standard analyzed under same conditions from the database of the SAFE library. Of the 60 peaks present, 43 compounds were identified and 17 peaks were unidentified. This is a table showing the bioactive compounds identified from the methanolic leaf extract of Anomoricaria using HRLCMS. This is the chromatogram of methanolic leaf extract of Anomoricaria. This is the picture showing the chemical structure of phytocomponents identified using HRLCMS. Around 43 compounds chemical structure was identified. Coming to analysis and discussion, the phytochemicals reported in Anomoricaria are alkaloids, flavonoids, carbohydrates, cardiac glycosides, saponins, tannins, phytosterols, terpenoids, and protein. According to Comencilla et al., the secondary metabolites are considered as compounds synthesized by plant tissue as first line of defense mechanism. The ethanolic leaf extract of Anomoricaria showed presence of reducing sugar as reported in the study. In the present study, in addition to flavonoids, alkaloids, cardiac glycoside, tannins, triterpenoid, and saponin. In the present study, 17 of the peaks in the chromatogram remain unidentified when compared to the SAFE database. The peaks include a few major peaks, and these may be new compounds, and further advanced analytical techniques are required to elucidate these compounds. Most of the phytoconstituents isolated from Anomoricaria have been isolated from other plant sources and have exhibited pharmacological activities. Tannins have stringent properties and are concerned with wound healing, prevention of cancer, as well as treatment of flamed or ulcerated tissues. According to Rabi and Bichet, terpenoids possess antimicrobial, antifungal, antiparasitic, antiviral, anti-allergic, antipasmodic, anti-inflammatory, and immunomodulatory properties. According to Chung et al., plants containing carbohydrate, glycosides, and coumarins exert a positive reinforcement on immune system enhancing body strength. Antimicrobial activity is exhibited by saponins, tannins, and triterpenoids. Carotenoids exhibit a range of biological and health benefits. Epidemiological studies indicate that use of carotenoid-rich diet is related to lower incidence of cancer, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, diabetes, cataract, and also enhances longevity of life. According to Koravi et al., camphorol is a flavonoid with gastroprotective effects, anti-ulcerogenic effect with inhibition of endogenous prostaglandins. Carotenoids, alkaloids, and flavonoids are antioxidants, which is their key mechanism of action. They scavenge the free radicals generated due to oxidative stress. The inhibition of active radicals is by transfer of electrons, donating hydrogen atoms to radicals and attaching to radicals. Recommendations. The results from the present study revealing the further exploration in the field of phytochemical remediation using indigenous and ethnic plant-based resources. Coming to the conclusion, the wide pharmacological and biological characteristics of the compounds identified in the present study confirm the potency of Anomoricaria being used in traditional medicine. These compounds are capable of independent and synergistic action that adds to the advantage of Anomoricaria to be used as an immunostimulant to suppress the toxicological effects. Thank you.
Well, that was a very wonderful presentation by Reena Michael and Dr. M.L. Joseph. The presenter is now open for question answer session, and if there is any query from the audience side, it's most welcome. So with that, we move on to our next presenter, Ranjana Bengnani. The title of the presentation is Evaluation of Water and Sediment Quality of Tapi Estuary, Gujarat, Surat, Gujarat. So please assert yourself if you're present, Ranjana Bengnani.
Yes, ma'am.
Please share your screen and start presenting directly. And the presenters are reminded of the time constraint, so please stick to 8 minutes.
Dignitaries and today I am going to present the paper on this evaluation of water and sediment quality of Tapi estuary, Surat, Gujarat. So the present study was selected from the area that is highly influenced with the industrial discharges. So the aim of the present study was to know the quality of water and sediment in the estuary with reference to the pollution from anthropogenic as well as industrial activities. So the speedy growth of industrialization and anthropogenic activities along this highly productive ecosystem has declined the water and sediment quality of the estuaries. So these important biotic factors that are regulating the ecosystem, where all the life that depends upon the water quality, depends upon the productivity of the water, they are affected with the pollution knowingly or unknowingly in the water body. So these unstrained discharges, industrial effluent, agriculture runoff, seaways, and other important anthropogenic activities have affected the Tapi estuary. So keeping in mind that what is the present status of the estuary, the sediment and water quality of the estuary was selected, as sediment is directly affected with the quality of water. Its sediment is a place where all the important pollutants they get added. So the present study was carried out to determine the important physicochemical parameters of water and sediment of Tapi estuary at Dumas jetty, and the water parameters selected were turbidity, conductivity, total solid, total dissolved solid, salinity, pH, dissolved oxygen, BOD, COD, calcium, chloride, sodium, potassium, nutrient like nitrate, nitrite, and phosphate. An analysis of sediment included the parameters like pH, moisture, total solid, carbon percent, organic matter, nitrate, phosphate, and total petroleum hydrocarbon. So these parameters were selected on the basis of the source of pollutant. As nearby this Dumas jetty, there are so many industrial areas like Hazira industrial belt where there is ONGC, Tripco, L&T. So large number of industries are surrounded at that place, and these oil and petroleum industries that are the sources for this petroleum hydrocarbon. So this is the Dumas jetty, the selected study site where the water samples, and this area is mainly used for the fishing activities, and large numbers of boats and shipping activities are also going on this area. And second thing, the carving of this soil is also going on in this area, which deteriorate the water quality of the area. So these are the study outcomes. Turbidity was close relation. They have close relationship with each other. So increase in the turbidity, there is effect in the conductivity of the water, and this conductivity of the water has direct influence on the absorption and other ionic concentration of the water. Similarly, TS, TDS, and TSS that were monitored, they are also beyond the limitations. So the water quality was very unsuitable for the aquatic organism. So this TS is TDS plus TSS. BOD, COD, and DO. These three factors, they determine the oxygen concentration in the water body. So due to the high influence of organic matter and the deterioration of this water quality, very high COD. So high COD in the water level that indicate the pollution, industrial pollution. So this chemical oxygen demand that was highly increased, and this oxygen was depleted in the water body. So this the DO, BOD and COD, this determines the living population in the water body. So decrease in the DO level and increase in the level of BOD and COD, that will affect the living organism survival in the water body. Next, the nutrient nitrate, nitrite and phosphate. These are very important for the survival of the aquatic organism. So increase in nitrite and nitrate, that will toxic to the aquatic life. So this aquatic life will be directly affected and due to the increase of nitrate and nitrite. And during the study, it was concluded that this nitrate and nitrite level was higher than that is recommended for the aquatic life. And next, calcium in the present study was found very higher, which also shows the influx of industrial waste and sewage to the water body. So this chloride and sodium level, calcium and potassium, they were also very higher during the study period. That directly shows that the water body is influenced with the industrial sewage, agriculture runoff. Oil and grease and this total petroleum hydrocarbon, they were also found very higher during the study period. So 7.33 mg per liter was the concentration of oil and grease, and total petroleum hydrocarbon was 0.35 microgram per liter. So this increase in oil and grease, that forms a layer on the water body, and that is also one of the reasons for the depletion of oxygen, because the layer of the oil and grease, that will not help to penetrate the oxygen and other nutrient in the water body. And next, it will also affect the growth of the planktons and all phytoplanktons that are the food of the aquatic organisms. So directly this oil and grease and total petroleum hydrocarbon, their label that forms a film on the surface water that inhibits gas diffusion and photosynthesis in water column. So oil emulsion can impair respiratory system of pelagic and benthic biota. This is an indication of contamination of surface water by the petroleum product. So this contamination might be from the fact that the influent discharge from the nearby industries contain petroleum products. Similarly, the nutrients and pollutants, they are absorbed by the sediment and benthic organisms that depends upon the sediments, and sediment will be also the source of collecting all these pollutant and nutrient, and it release slowly in the water body. So it's become a sink for the pollutant. And this sedimentary pH also that was found alkaline throughout the study period. The level of carbon in sediment is a reliable index of nutrient regeneration and the productivity. So this carbon concentration in the sediment was also very high. Phosphorus level in the sediment was also very high. Similarly, the total petroleum hydrocarbon that was present in the water, the level was increased many-fold in the sediment. So it is an indication that the petroleum hydrocarbon product that is released in the water body, that gets sticks to the sediment particles, and that is very harmful for the benthic and aquatic organisms of the study. So the concentration of the total petroleum hydrocarbon in the study area, that was lower than the natural background, but the label which was indicated is harmful for the benthic organisms. So my study concludes that the anthropogenic industrial activities have a very high impact on the on the natural physicochemical properties of water and sediment, and it need to be assessed and monitored regularly. And in this concern, the authorities bodies were also, the result were also dispatched, and they have given to the authorities body, so the continuous monitoring of that water bodies will be carried on to see the pollution status of the estuaries. So thank you for giving me the time for the presentation, and now if there is any questions and query, they are welcome.
The presenter is now open for question answer session.
Which is under the supervision and guidance of Dr. Padmanabh Samanta, PG Department of Mathematics, Barampur University, Barampur, Odisha, of course, India. Well, my contents belongs to introduction, model notations and assumptions, mathematical model development, numerical examples, conclusions, followed by reference, of course. In introduction, as you know, inventory is a physical stock that a stockist kept on hand in order to prompt the smooth and efficient running of its affairs. Due to deterioration and demand, there are various types of uncertainties occurs in real life inventory. Traditionally, they are modeled by probability theory. The result that comes by applying a probability theory is more accurate. However, there are uncertainties in demand, deterioration, shortage, etc. that cannot be appropriately treated as usual probabilistic model. Hence, it becomes more convenient to deal such problems with the fuzzy-set theory. So in fuzzy-set theory was introduced first time by Ali Jahed in 1965. After the introduction of fuzzy-set theory, it was appreciated by many researchers day by day. In 1983, Jacob et al. Proposed a model on long-term policy making through fuzzy decision-making model. Subsequently, in 1983, G. Udgalti developed the inventory control models and problems. Similarly, so many authors have made fuzzy-set theoretical interprets economics. However, in the present paper, an inventory model has been developed for fixed deterioration and linear demand. The objective is to obtain fuzzy optimal solution to minimize the total cost per time unit of an inventory control system based on the parameters are fuzzified as hexagonal fuzzy number sorted by HMN, and defuzzify the fuzzy model by using graded mean representation method, GMIR method. In short, I can say that. So I have take some definitions and preliminary. In definitions, I describe what is a fuzzy set. A fuzzy set is nothing but an order pair of a convex fuzzy set, which is an element for which is denoted by capital A tilde, and it is the order pair where a capital X is a space. And in next definition, a fuzzy set A tilde where X such that mu A tilde X subset of X is called convex fuzzy set if all X tilde are convex set. That is for every element X1 and X2 belongs to alpha, where alpha belongs to my 0 and 1 closed interval such that lambda x1 plus 1 minus lambda 2 lambda x2 belongs to alpha, mistake, for all lambda belongs to 0, 1 closed interval, otherwise the fuzzy set is called non-convex fuzzy set. So if, next definition stands for a fuzzy set A alpha B alpha, where alpha belongs to 0, 1 closed interval such that A less than B, defined on the real line R, is called fuzzy interval if it is members with function is like that, mu of A alpha B alpha equal to it contains two value. If alpha belongs to AB closed interval, if X belongs to AB closed interval, the value is alpha, otherwise it stands for my 0. Next is the fuzzy number A tilde, where BC, where A less than B less than C are defined on R, is called triangular fuzzy number. Since it is triangular fuzzy number, so it considers three elements A, B, C, which the membership function stands for mu L tilde x and defined as like this. If x belongs to x belongs to a b closed interval, then the value stands for x minus a by b minus a. And if x belongs to b comma c closed interval, then the value stands for c minus x by c minus v. In spite that the value stands for my 0, I mean if x is greater than equal to c, then its values is 0. Similarly, if x is less than a, then the values are considered as 0. So in special case, when a equal to b equal to c, we have the falsified obviously like this. The in parenthesis it stands for c c c, or simply you can put it as c. The family of all triangular Fuzzy numbers on R is denoted by like this. Denoted by f of n a b c, such that a less than b less than c for all a b c belongs to R, where the alpha cut of a tilde is this much, a b c belongs to f, where alpha belongs to 0, 1 closed interval. It is the domain of the function, and where a alpha equal to a plus b minus a into alpha, and a r of alpha equal to c minus b into alpha, and at the left right endpoints of a alpha, these are considered as so similarly, like triangular Fuzzy number, I defines a hexagonal Fuzzy number where there are 6 elements are taken, a b c d e f, such that obviously a less than b less than c less than d less than e and less than f, and it has also 5 values. When x belongs to my closed interval a b, the value is denoted by L1 of x, and it stands for half into x minus a by b minus a. When x belongs to b comma c closed interval, then the value is half into half plus half into x plus half into x minus b by c minus d. When the value x belongs to c comma d closed interval, then the Fuzzy number stands for 1. And when x belongs to d comma e closed interval, then it is denoted by r1 of x, and is the values 1 minus half into x minus d by e minus d. And of course, when x belongs to e comma f closed interval, the value denoted by r2x and defined as half into f minus x by f minus c. In spite that overall the remaining value can be considered as 0. And of course, the alpha cut of a tilde equal to a b c d e f. Obviously, as before, alpha belongs to 0, 1 closed interval, and a alpha equal to a of L alpha, h of r alpha, where a L1 alpha equal to a plus b minus a into alpha equal to L1 inverse of a. This is the relation between L1 alpha and L1 inverse of alpha. And similarly, Al2 alpha stands this value, R1 alpha stands this value, R2 alpha stands this value. Like this, and L inverse of alpha equal to L1 inverse of alpha plus L2 inverse alpha whole divided by 2, and whose values is concluded by a plus b plus c minus a whole into alpha divided by 2. Similarly, r alpha of a equal to r1 alpha in r1 inverse alpha plus r2 inverse alpha whole divided by 2, and concluded with the value e plus f plus d minus f into alpha whole divided by 2. Similarly, the obviously as I need GMIR method, so if a is an hexagonal Fuzzy number where a tilde stands for, obviously I have to choose 6 point A B C D E F, then the GMIR method of a tilde can be defined and denoted by P of a tilde, and defined as 1 by 12 into a plus 3b plus 2c plus 2d plus 3 plus f from the definition of a GMIR method, which is a defuzzification. So next is in definition 7, suppose x tilde equal to, since it is a hexagonal Fuzzy number, so I have chosen 6 points through x-axis, x1, x2, x3, x4, x5 and x6, and y tilde I consider 6 point y1, y2, y3, y4, y5, y6 are 2 hexagonal Fuzzy numbers, and where all x1 to x6 and y1 to y6 are real number, then the arithmetic operation under the the function principle can be written as follows, like this. X tilde ring sum y tilde equal to x1 plus y1. It is mathematical operation. Similarly, is x1 coordinate added to y1 coordinate, x2 coordinate added to y2 coordinate, and so on. So similarly, x tilde ring multiplication y tilde equal to x1 y1, x2 y2, x3 y3, and h2 x6 y6. There is a missing parenthesis, and minus of y tilde equal to minus of y6 minus which turns to from right to left, and y1 by y tilde equal to obviously y inverse. You can see this, and similarly x tilde by y tilde. These are the definitions. Next to come to my model. In model, I have took some notations as assumptions where notations are like this. It is the one hand inventory at time t equal to t1, like this. These are the my notations. So I go to the assumptions. So in assumptions, it is the important thing. So I've chosen a single inventory will be used. The lead time should be 0, shortage are not allowed and are fully backlogged. Replacement rate is infinite, but size is finite. Stock dependent demand rate is considered. Time horizon is also finite, it should be finite, and there is no repair of deteriorated items occurring during the cycle. So in this assumptions of notation, my model is obviously in my model, I have taken two types of models. Some extended both are equal, Crisp model and Fuzzy model. There is a difference between by an element and a function between Crisp model and Fuzzy model. So in Crisp model, it is assumed that the inventory level initially at time t equal to 0 is Q. Due to reason of market demand and deterioration of item, the inventory level gradually diminishes during the period 0, t. Yes, ma'am.
You have one more minute to wind up.
Yes, minute. So this is my Crisp model, and this is the model I have got. Similarly, it is my Fuzzy model. As I compare what is the difference between Fuzzy model and Crisp model, and with this I have taken a numerical example which defines the Crisp model and Fuzzy model. So concluded in this paper, we represent a Fuzzy inventory model for stock dependent demand rate, fixed deteriorating items with shortage under fully backlogged condition. The proper model is developed in both Crisp model and environmental model. In Fuzzy inventory model, all related inventory parameters were assumed to be hexagonal Fuzzy number. The optimal results of Fuzzy model is diffusive by GMI method, and these are my reference. And thank you. Yeah, over.
Presenter is now open for the question answer session. So if there is any query from the audience side, it's most welcome.
Shruti and Pooja. So we've always, known the need for basic healthcare, it being a fundamental need. So if we get started with the presentation, the first slide, Pooja. We've always realized that basic healthcare is a fundamental need, and the current pandemic situation just amplified the need for it. So if we specifically looked at the Indian context, we are seeing that the hospitals are categorized into two major segments, which is public and private healthcare. On one hand, we have the public healthcare focusing on rural and lower income urban communities. The private sector, the private segment of the hospitals, they are focusing on high level of services, but they are not really affordable by very many citizens of the country. So it really exposes a very stark contrast on the quality of care being provided to the urban and the rural population. We also studied the per capita healthcare expenditure across the world. And it was really an eye-opener to know that India had the lowest, one of the lowest healthcare expenditure per capita. And this in turn results in issues of manpower availability, because both for clinical and non-clinical cases, the service delivered to the patients gets pretty low in this case. So what does this impact? What does it tell us for the COVID situation specifically? Let's look at the next slide. So we've of course been hit by multiple waves of infection. On one hand, we have the hospitals which are facing significant shortage of testing supplies. There are long waits for test results. We are seeing that there is a severe shortage of PPE, so a lot of risk of spread, and this risk of spread is actually keeping the staff also away from the hospital, which means there is shortage of healthcare. It's a butterfly effect happening. While this is on the not so intensive side, the story on the intensive care side is even more scarier. They're not designed to handle the amount of um, cases coming to them today. So they are running at a really critical situation today. So if we look at expensive high quality therapy that needed to be given for intensive situations, critical cases, high intervention cases, it is clearly evident that the citizens in the rural and the low income communities are grossly underserved compared to their urban counterparts, and also has an impact for patients with severe symptoms. They are having difficulties due to the lack of suitable facilities. COVID is now one, and we don't know how many more newer diseases are coming our way. And with every variant, every new variant of even the ongoing pandemic coming in, it just adds to the increasing need and the complication for our healthcare system. So what is our literature survey telling us? Let's get to the next slide. We are seeing that technology is coming in as a savior. In this current context and in the last couple of years, we've seen improved healthcare delivery and reduction in pharmaceutical mistakes. All of these leading to lesser stay in the hospital, not so many side effects for the patients, avoiding death. All of these have been the result of the deployment of technology. So this is a very optimistic trend that we are seeing with the infusion of technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, IoT, and smart devices. These we studied as the major technologies that are coming together and powering the healthcare sector. On the other hand, we also studied a little bit more about the creators of these technologies. We studied that startups are coming up, they are bringing up new innovations, and they are actually coming to the fore to solve a lot of these problems on the ground. And we also have corporate companies, the bigger enterprises that are coming in and collaborating with these startups. We know that a typical startup life results in 90% of startups failing, and they have a valley of death where they can literally go bankrupt and go off the go off the record. But we're seeing that the support, the collaboration, the co-innovation between the startups and the corporates are actually helping address the issues that are plaguing healthcare delivery and management in this specific case that we are discussing today. We are seeing that on one side, the corporates have an opportunity to learn from these startups, and these startups have an opportunity to learn more about the market structure, leadership skills from the corporates. So it's a very win-win situation between both startups and the corporates collaborating on technology for healthcare. So let's get to how we went about our methodology for this study on the next slide. So we looked at startups.
You're left with 3 more minutes.
Sure.
You're left with 3 more minutes.
So we looked at startups. We looked at startups in the healthcare space. We looked at startups in the healthcare space working in tandem with the corporates. So that's how we went to our shortlisting of our startups for this study. And we studied in depth using a combination of qualitative interviews and secondary data. We got several insights from those startups which were part of the corporate accelerators. For those new to this terminology, corporate accelerators are those frameworks that are available, they are in motion, that are available for co-innovating between startups and the corporates today. So what are our observations? Let's go to the next slide. We found a lot of data, a lot of information around, and we see that major implementations like electronic health records, integration with clinical management, e-pharmacy, teleconsultation, all of these are readily achievable by the startups themselves, and they are improving healthcare, no doubt about it. They are lowering the hospital costs. But some interesting observations came in, which resulted in us dividing our healthcare startups into 3 segments, which are under reactive, predictive, and the lifestyle management segment. And we also see that artificial intelligence adoption cuts across the 3 segments, and this is really going to revolutionize the AI-enabled healthcare services across our country. We'll go to the next slide to get a little bit more of insights. So while self-management of healthcare, it has been done very neatly by the startups themselves, but when it comes to large-scale deployments, which requires bigger infrastructural capabilities and all that, it required a more solid foundation, and that's where the corporates, the collaboration played in very nicely, and they are part of the reactive segment. Though the number of startups innovating in this reactive segment is comparatively lesser, but we are seeing that in this current scenario, more of them are actually seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. They're actually going to market, they're getting deployed. The more interesting segment is the predictive segment, where you see the most amount of co-innovation happening. And I think this is a natural observation as well, because a lot of corporates want to work on disruptive technologies. They want to work with startups that are experts in those specific areas, but only a couple of them are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and getting to market so far. So this is on the 2 segments, while the third aspect about life cycle management is not seeing too many of corporate participation or co-innovation today, which brings us to the contribution of our study, the impact significance of our study here on the next slide, is that it is adding a new dimension to the startup evaluation phase for the corporates. What's in it for the startups? Those that are in the ideation phase, it gives them a totally different perspective of the healthcare ecosystem itself. It classifies them, it buckets them into categories that they would ideally want to start a startup in. And they know that this is likely to succeed, this is likely to be taken up by a corporate for the next step, and this is likely to be deployed as well. If we look at future research in associated areas, I think we should go a next step in identifying what is the efficacy, what are some of the benchmarks, what is the end user, the patient impact of deployment of some of these technologies, which are disruptive today using the power of AI. And as I conclude on the last slide, we have seen that corporates are coming together, co-innovating with the startup. This is going to be a deadly combination, bringing in the stability of the corporates, the innovativeness of the startups, and together it's going to enhance the quality of lives of people across the world, across our country. Thank you.
Well, that was a very nice presentation by Shruti Kannan ma'am. Any queries or question from the audience side is most welcome to the presenter. If there is any question. So I think with that, we move on to our next presenter, Dr. Gantalu Uma Sukaya. And
afternoon, dignitaries of this International Conference of Science, Engineering, Technology and Innovation. I feel pleasure to present my paper in this conference. And my study of my research paper is based on the study of economical fluctuations of Baramati fish market. So this was a paper which we have continuously working with a survey with my students, that is Khilaria Purva and Pawar Rajni, and they are in PG. So now because of COVID conditions, we are not in contact. So I am going to present it and this. So introductions first. So as you know that ichthofauna, the fish fauna, is an important aspects of fishery potential of water body. So it mainly contributes to blue economy. So in Indian, we see that white economy and blue economy contributes major to their GDP So inland freshwater fisheries are important sources of employment, food, recreation, and communities. So many researchers have studied on fish diversity and differential geographical locations. So this study was based on the blue economy, especially on the small scale fishery sector in India, which depends on fish catch and supply chain. So fishes contributes to the important sector of food and nutritional sector. So we see that fisheries sector contributes to 1.1% of overall GDP of our country. So next, what material methods we have used in this particular survey of research paper? That is, we have, because Baramati, I am belonging to this particular local region. I am professor in Shardabai Pawar Mahila Mahavidyalaya. So this area I have selected. So Baramati Fish Market receives fishes from this big one, which is 30 kilometers away from Baramati. So during the present study of Baramati Fish Market, I told my students to visit for the survey and the collections for different species which are coming from this market. And we have considered only 3 months, that were July, August, and September. So the survey was done on the number of species which were brought to the market for selling purposes, then the rate of each particular species, then the cost of each particular species, highest price of that species which is costing, lowest price of species, then abundant species of consumers, and total income gain daily on selling the species, the parameters like diversity, fish species, and density, fish from the market, and economy. So we have studied for 1 year on this particular 3 months. Then afterward, immediately the lockdown was there. And so that I have continued with the lockdown period also. So in that particular lockdown periods, we have seen that what was the effect on that particular fish market. So this is what about the Baramati fish market. That is, so what are the species? Now we see that it is a 30 kilometers away from where the big one, whatever the species which are collected and brought to this regions. So that the species were Katla, that Labia rohita, Tilapia, Ilia, Pomfret, eel, Pomfret, mackerel, and catfishes. So these 2 seasons which we say we considered that were before Shravan, that was beginning of from June, because generally we consider June to August as the breeding season of these fishes. So considering that fact only, we have selected what was the actual fluctuation of that market when people visit for buying of these fishes. So before Shravan, we see that the prices were completely high and the sold in the market was also 95%. So each species which was brought from the market was completely sold 95% till 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. But after Shravan also, that means from June, July, August, September, we have considered. So we have seen that whatever the species which were collected were only 50% of them were sold, and the prices also have been completely reduced. So this was the fluctuation that we said, because only we see 95 to only 50%, that means persons were feeding on this particular fishes. So the fish market, we see that the rate of fishes in July month was more. You can see on the graphical presentations. Then here in the August month also, you can see the rate of fishes which was there in August Shravan month, that was completely dying. The next month we can see that the rate in August and that was in Shravan month, that was 50% completely reduced. The prices were also become low. So this we can see that after again that period, that from June to August, after September, we see again there was the rise in that particular price level and the economy also. So what does this mean? This means that the same effect which was seen, that what fluctuation which was seen in only for a 3-month period, the same fluctuation was seen after lockdown.
Ma'am, you are left with 1 more minute.
Okay. Yes, I'll conclude it. So before lockdown, it was seen that the market was completely vacant, and after before lockdown, it was completely full. Now after lockdown, it was completely. So we have survey about the sellers of the fishes also. So in that, before pandemic, these fish sellers were earning near about thousands rupees, and then now they are earning only 300 rupees. So that was the main reason in that economy. It was fluctuating not only to the stakeholders but also to the other persons. So what results and conclusions we have concluded that found that the rate of consumption was consumer were more before June, and the August period the market was completely declined, and this August and June to August is the breeding season of these fishes, where most of these fishes were laying eggs. So therefore we see that in our culture, that in mythology, that science work and mythology and science work together. Why I'm saying like this? Because that period is considered for prohibition of the flesh eating. Mostly when we observe this Shravan month. So it is seen that this is also the peak period where the fishes mostly laying their eggs. They are depositing the eggs. They are completely having thousands lakhs of eggs in their belly. So it is completely that means we see that it is completely prohibited, that we should not that kill in that particular period. So survey during this pandemic COVID also we see that the economy completely declined due to lockdown situations. So unlocked affect the shutdown of market economy, affected on the transportation because the transportation was not there, the catchment was not there, and the supply chain was disrupted. So it has affected many on this stakeholders were also affected in this particular pandemic period. So heavy impact on the fishery sector on the species on socio-economic conditions of these stakeholders can be seen in this particular fish market. So it is just a simple survey of about only a particular region of it. So if you contribute most on the Indian fisheries of fresh land and marine, it will be a very more devastating. So that was a small study which we have studied on the economical fluctuations which have been seen. So with this, I end. These are the references which have been. So first, initially, we were studying only for that particular 3 months. So afterwards, we have concluded the pandemic also. And in that pandemic, we have found that most of these stakeholders lost their jobs, lost their economy and all this. So thank you.
The presenter is now open for question answer session. Any queries from the audience side is most welcome.
Warm good afternoon wishes to the organizers, coordinators, and esteemed knowledgeable audience. I express my sincere gratitude to provide me a chance for expression of my thoughts. Myself, Dr. Ishita Ghosh from Netaji Subhas University, Jamshedpur. As you know, India. Today, as you know, today is the World Population Day, and on this day, let us know more about our universe, its past, present, and future, the universe where we live. So my topic of presentation will be dark matter and dark energy. How dark are they actually? So let's start with the first thing, that is Big Bang theory. Big Bang, that is all how the universe came into being. The Big Bang is a theory of how the universe was formed. The scientists believe that our universe began with a big explosion. First of all, it was just a tiny matter, a single particle, and in that single particle called the primeval atom, all the matter and energy in the space was concentrated before the Big Bang. And in this tiny single particle, the primeval atom, when it exploded in the Big Bang, this explosion is thought to be considered to be occurring about 15 billion years ago. And then on the time, since then, the universe has been expanding and getting bigger, and here is where we live. So what powered the Big Bang? So here's a picturization of what happened exactly before the Big Bang and how the things proceeded after it. So as you can see, there comes the inflation after the Big Bang. This is just 10 to the power minus 43 seconds after the Big Bang. So you can understand just the preliminary point at which the Big Bang took place. And after that, inflation. Inflation means exponential rise in the matter. And then on, as the years are increasing, we're seeing how the things have expanded, the cosmic microwave background, and how the gravitational waves and the matter and has come to the help of what we actually see today. So it's really 15 billion years ago when the Big Bang took place. And after that, the universe has expanded and got to the present state today. Is it? So here's the picturization, the Big Bang occurring and the farthest supernova. Supernova is explosion of the stars. And then the thing has expanded. And as you can see, the vast universe, which we really cannot see whole of it, but you can imagine at least and see, at least perceive the vastness of the universe, that all started with the Big Bang. And then on, it is accelerating, it is expanding, it's becoming bigger and bigger and expanding after the Big Bang. So here, now is my topic of dark matter and dark energy. The Big Bang happened, the small primeval atom exploded, Big Bang took place, and the billions of years passed by, and the universe has taken the shape as it is today. We see it, we live in it, but do we really know what is there in it? How do we consider it? We, the living beings, but what are there in the celestial bodies? What is there in the universe? This is more or less a graph which shows what we know and what we don't know. So the name is given as a dark matter and dark energy. Dark simply refers that we have minimal knowledge about that, so it's dark. But let us see how much knowledge do we have and why do we classify it as dark matter or dark energy. Now, as this pie chart shows you, normal matter 4.9%. This is actually the thing which we know, which we see around us, the stars, the galaxies, and all those we see. This is the dark energy. You can see what amount of dark energy we have, 68.3%. This part is the thing which we really don't know, but we still have given the name as energy, because I will explain it in the coming slides. And this is the matter. Surely something is different in matter and energy, so we have classified it differently, but you can see what is the amount which we know and what is the amount which we don't know. So let's study how much we know and what are these mysterious materials actually is dominating the universe where we live. So this is around the time when the Big Bang took place. You can see the percentages over the screen, and after this is the 13.7 billion years ago, but this is the present day. This is the thing which we have actually come up. So you can understand that we still now don't know much of it in detail. We are just guessing, we are just probing, we are just understanding, we are trying to explain the things which are happening. The sources are, you can see, as given below. This is the total parts and the subparts. This consists of energy and this is matter. Though matter and energy are related to each other, as you know by the famous Einstein's equation, E is equal to mc square, but here this part is the energy, this part is the matter, the solid matter which we see. Now out of this matter can be divided into two parts. Regular matter. So what is this regular matter? Regular matter is that you can see around us, which we have perceived, which we have probed into, the stars, galaxies, dust, etc. This part is still unknown. So let's know the more details about it. These small amount or say percentages of things are which we have got it. I have given a greater detail. What are they? They are composed of heavy elements, neutrinos, stars, free hydrogen, etc. But still we are concerned with matter and energy. And as you can see, this is the thing which bothers, because the universe is not stagnant. Universe is expanding. Universe is changing day by day. So what made us give this name matter and energy? Let's come to the topic. So it is the matter, just it is named as matter because it has one of the important properties of matter, that is it has gravitational force. It has the gravitational force. It has the force to attract materials around it. It has the property to attract the particles around it. And as you can see, they are classified. They are given certain properties. They have show some properties due to which they are classified as matter. You can see the motion, the temperature, the gravitational lensing. But why do we call it energy? Energy, this, as you can understand, here I will tell you one important difference. The matter has a tendency to contract. It is trying to pull it. They are trying to attract itself. So it has a nature of attracting. While you can see that energy, this is the energy which the universe is containing in itself, about 70% of it, which is pushing the universe. It is pushing the energy. It is the energy which is pushing the universe so that it is expanding. It's expanding. The Hubble's law tells that the farther galaxies travel with more speed. So these things, where is the energy coming from? This is the dark energy. This has been termed as energy because it has a particular characteristics of trying to accelerate the system to expand and continue to grow. So that is the energy. While the matter, as I told you, it has the property of gravitational property. It has the property of attraction. So this is the basic difference. And as you can see, the things are though not clear, but still we are trying to find out the similarities which will tell us how and why this can be termed as matter and energy. So matter and energy are the two different aspects of the things in universe which we are trying to probe and become clear what is this. Now here, as I told you, there's a property of attraction, there's a property of expansion. So dark energy, as you can see, it's pulling apart. So dark energy needs to be more, because otherwise if dark matter would have been more, then it would have been contracting, but it's not contracting. The universe is expanding, and year by year, time by time, as the moments are passing, as we're coming on from latter years to the present time, you can see the dark energy is increasing, means the universe is expanding. It's a tug of war between the matter and energy. Matter is trying to contract it, energy is trying to expand it. And then after all, this is what happened, serially representing what actually happened in all the while. You can see the matter and energy and the struggle starting from here.
You have 1 more minute, ma'am, to conclude.
Data, but still we are increasing and trying to find out more of it. So this is the present, past, and future. It can proceed this way or it can proceed that way. The universe may collapse or the universe may expand, depending on the amount of matter and energy available to us. These are the certain recent discoveries which we have done relating to the things. And this is finally the thing which I wanted to tell. This is the Big Bang. This is where we are here now. This can go in this way if we expand. This can go in this way if we are unstable, or it may be something which we don't know. So eventually attractive and expansive forces may balance each other and we may get something new. So these are the few conclusions which I want to make. And after all, Stephen Hawking said the correct thing, that the missing link is the nature of dark matter and energy. And thank you so much for your attention and time. I hope I could throw some light on the dark matter and energy in this short time. Thank you so much. Thank you, audience.
Presenter is now open for question answer session. If there is any query from the audience side.
Sharing my slide, but it will be just a quick presentation. Do you see my slide, ma'am?
Yeah, this slide is visible, sir. The audience is all yours.
Yeah. So good afternoon. So I was given the task to discuss about the culture of research. So during the pandemic crisis, a lot of educators and scholars felt devastated because they think that they cannot continue with their academic scholarly work. The good thing with the research publication and the submission continues to grow, eventually because this leads to researchers and scholars to write on topics related to COVID-19. So a lot of researchers and scholars opens its door in the research and development during the pandemic. So it's just a pandemic we are facing right now, and we need to think or innovate a new strategy in order to survive in this battlefield. So during the lockdown, they present some significant challenges for researchers. It also gave them some significant opportunities for researchers. The first involves asking the new resilient organizational culture are actually this would be good for them. So a group of researchers like the ICSAD, which is the Institute of Economic Development and Social Researches based from Turkey, and other international research institutions, facilitates its call for proper paper presentation globally by using an alternative mode of presentation as part of their advocacy to help the society in terms of research. So also journal publications waive their article processing fee to give way to those scholars or writers who are greatly affected with the pandemic situation. So sitting aside from the future universities, COVID has exposed more immediate challenges for research colleagues around the world. Researchers have quickly reoriented their studies to meet public health needs. So the implementation for this new research culture using technological-based platform like ResearchGate and Google Scholar boosts the emotions of the scholars and writers to continue with their endeavor and come up with a good publishable paper that is globally readable and competitive enough that can be cited as many as the researchers have read it. So other publication offers a free publication, and even researcher conferences are also being offered to them. So generally, researchers see the way, and even researcher have cooperated as a huge positive in this time of pandemic. So, but a lot of scientists welcome the way the pandemic has already changed the way the community by the transitioning to a complete new culture of doing research and development. As a researcher by heart, I will promote introduce the new methods in conducting research like quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method research designed locally or globally. So since the beginning of lockdown, the research institution has recorded an explosive growth of data during the COVID-19, which resulted to more than 19,250 publications, 250 data sets, 16 grants, and 217 patents and even other related to research. This have fed into more 200 policy documents that eventually led to publications and research presentations. So finally, the researcher would also like, or the presenter would also like to conclude that there's a big opportunity in research and development in this time of pandemic. So what I can advise is so stay at home and do a collaborative research that can be cited and publishable in a reputable journal, which can be indexed in DOJ or Directory of Open Access Journal, Web of Science, a Science Citation Index, and other high impact factor indexing databases. So thank you and good afternoon, everyone, and stay safe. So that would be all. Thank you.
Well, that was a very wonderful presentation by Sir. We are honored, and I think we gained a lot of